Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our special coverage of the Russia-Ukraine file. We have via Skype Emmanuel Pouchelet, an analytical analyst, or let's say political analyst, who's going to be talking to us about the latest on the ground, also in-depth analysis about the Russia-Ukraine file. We also have a guest from Ukraine who is also joining us via Skype, Mr. Kirill, who's also going to be making an in-depth analysis about the latest development. We're going to go through a break and then we come back for more insights. So as announced earlier, the war in Ukraine is not just a regional conflict. It has become a much larger confrontation between the West and Russia. In this sense, it has some of the characteristics of a proxy war, with the West standing foursquare behind Ukraine in its fight against Russia. Western leaders have said that they will not become directly involved in the war, but their provision of military aid and intelligence to Ukraine carries the risk of their being drawn inadvertently into the conflict. The longer the war drags on, the greater the risk of the West being pulled in, either as a result of military miscalculation by either side, or the war accidentally spilling over into NATO member state. Such an unplanned event would pose the risk of much more serious global conflict. All this is going to be discussed today in our special coverage by our panel of guests. I am joined live via Skype by Emmanuel Pouchelet, university lecturer and geopolitical analyst from France, and Molchanov Kirill, a political science expert from Ukraine. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. As we delve into discussion, let's share these important updates. One of the commanders of the Azov regiment said in a video message on Friday that the last Ukrainian soldiers entrenched in the Azovstal Steelworks have been ordered by Kiev to stop defending the city, resulting in full control of Mariupol by Russian troops.
The higher military command gave the order to save the lives of the soldiers of our garrison and to stop defending the city. Despite heavy fighting and the absence of supplies, we have always insisted on three conditions. The most important for us to evacuate the civilians, the wounded, and the corpses. We managed to save the civilians. The seriously wounded received the necessary help, and we managed to evacuate them with a view to a later exchange and their transport to territory controlled by Ukraine.
So let me commence with you, Mr. Emmanuel Pouchelet. Do you think that the agreement between Kiev and Moscow to exchange soldiers is a motive to Ukrainians who were besieged under the Azovstal steelwork to surrender?
I think that today the message between Kiev and Moscow is very important to analyze today. Because the two capital cities are, in fact, they've got negotiations in backstage negotiations, and we don't know exactly what is going on. I think the main goal of this crisis is to escape, but to have a good escape from the both parts. And I think this is important. The Azovstal factory was a main battle recently reported on the news. And of course, this is for the Russian side, of course. And also concerning the Ukrainian side, we have the Battle of Kharkiv, which is also important to underline today.
Very nice indeed. Mr. Molchanov Kirill, in your opinion, this outcome of the Russian military operation in Mariupol will lead them to use the same strategy in neighboring cities, for example, Odessa. What do you think?
Oh, hello. It will be maybe bad news if Russian troops want to have invasion in other Ukrainian cities like Odessa or Kharkiv, like in Mariupol, because maybe 99% of buildings of Mariupol is crashed. So the city is nowadays have no opportunities to normal life for their people. So I think this kind of war like Second World War, if Russia opinions to this strategy, it will be very bad situation to Ukrainian towns. And your another guest says about Azovstal. I see that now we don't have any agreements between Russia and Ukraine about the exchange of Ukrainians, the defenders of Mariupol. Russia says that they are in status of prisoners of war. Ukraine President Zelensky today says that Ukrainian want to exchange them on Russian troops, but I don't think that we will see these opportunities soon.
But Mr. Molchanov, Kirill, how likely is Russia to expand to other cities, according to you?
We don't know what is the strategic plan of Russian military forces, because in February and March they want to attack Kiev, like the capital city. They want to have a very big lands of Ukraine with their invasion. But nowadays, like I see, they want to attack maybe south part of Ukraine. Yes, Nikolaev, Odessa. Then that our country don't have any opportunity to export chrome and another maybe metal from to have crash Ukrainian economic at all. So I think maybe it will be there's next step to have some maybe invasion in the southern part against the Mariupol style.
Mr. Manuel Pushle, how likely do you think Russia is going to expand to other Ukrainian territories and Ukrainian cities? I mean, just as our distinguished guest just mentioned, probably it's just a diversion. I mean, what they try to do by attacking Kiev, maybe they are just covering for something else. What do you think?
I think the Russian strategy is very difficult to determine at the moment because we saw big defeats from the Russian army. But I think, as we can see, according to what it was said by the guest, I think Mr. Putin's strategy is to link the Russian minorities. Maybe in Moldova. I think it will be the next step. At the moment, Odessa is a too big challenge for Mr. Putin forces because we know the big challenges with corn exportation, and it's a harbor, a very strategic harbor for the international relations too, on economic relations, of course. But I think the next step for Mr. Putin is to try to link with the other Russian minorities. But be careful, Moldova is just a step behind the European Union. So we have to take care about this. We don't have any idea at the moment of what will going on. It's difficult to define a real strategy. Maybe to reinforce the Russian presence in the Donbass. I think this is the first strategy we could observe, but the next step at the moment is very difficult.
And do you think that perhaps Ukrainian forces would regain later? Maybe they could just step back and collect their breath and gain back the city that just fell?
I think it could be difficult for the Ukrainian forces without the Western support. I mean, European Union support and, of course, USA support. I mean, with delivery of weaponry, heavy weaponry, because we know that the Russian army, the key of the success of the operation is mainly linked with artillery. But now we are waiting for a counter-offensive from the Ukrainian force. And Mr. Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, I think it is its strategy today. But according to what we know in the diplomatic way, the goal is to go back to the early borders of Ukraine, even before the conflict. I mean, the Donbass could be stay in the Russian Federation, but it's very hard to to say today. The strategy is we saw trenches and it's immobile front, so I'm not sure it will be easy in the coming weeks.
Mr. Molchanov, Kirill, Crimea was not claimed back by the Ukrainians. Do you think that this will be the new reality of Ukraine without Mariupol and the Donbas region?
No, it's a very hard question because our government says that the final point of this war will be the attacks on all territories that the Russians have invaded from 2014 years. So our powers think that the Ukrainian military forces with the weapons from our West partners, from the United States, yes, from European Union, will help the Ukrainian troops to move south and west in Ukraine to have opportunity to go to all borders of our country. But like we see the situation about these 3 months, it will be very hard, maybe hard military operation. So our president last week says that he thinks that for Ukraine will be positive to move to the borders of starting of war on the 23rd February of this year. So maybe nowadays it's not possible to have opportunity to move about Crimea, about Mariupol, but we don't know what will be the situation maybe at half of year in the field of war.
Very nice indeed. Now, moving on to this info, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced that Russia will create 12 new military bases in the west of the country in response to NATO enlargement. This week, Finland and Sweden both formally applied for NATO membership, a move that was unthinkable before the start of the Russia special military operation in Ukraine on the 24th of February.
Applications for NATO membership have been submitted by our closest neighbors, Finland and Sweden. Tensions continue to rise in the Western Military District area. We're taking appropriate countermeasures. By the end of the year, 12 military bases and units will be deployed in the Western Military District. Ongoing organizational measures are synchronized with the supply of modern weapons and military equipment to the troops.
Back to you, Mr. Manuel Pușle. President Vladimir Putin said earlier that Swedish and Finnish NATO membership didn't pose a threat to Russia, but cautioned that Moscow would respond if the alliance boosted military infrastructure in the two countries. Murmansk region near Finland is packed with nuclear weapons and military facilities from the Russian side. A NATO-backed surprise attack on Russia could derail the supply chains between Moscow and Murmansk. How do you think this will, let's say, Moscow deal with it? How will Moscow deal with this threat in general?
I think Mr. Putin's challenge with NATO enlargement to Finland and Sweden is not a real problem for him, because he already knows what these countries are able to carry out, I mean, on the military aspect, missions, or deployment. But the enlargement of NATO is a new step in Europe, because before that, if you regarding back to the NATO history, it was first for Europe, but recently we saw that NATO was deployed mainly in Central Asia and other countries, which was not Europe, of course. And today, Murmansk region and Murmansk area is a key aspect of the nuclear forces of the Russian Federation. And with the arrival of Finland and Sweden, they could be good observers. Specialists say that Finland is ready for war because it has the Cold War experience for many years.
Russia has always suffered from having access to warm waters. Mr. Kirill Molchanov, do you think that Moscow will face difficulties in the Gulf of Finland and thus reach into the Baltic Sea? Do we have Molchanov, Kirill?
Oh, can you say one more time? I don't hear.
Yes, Mr. Molchanov, Kirill, I was saying whether this will pose a big challenge for Russia to reach the warm waters and the Baltic Sea.
Yeah, it will be the big problem to Russia because Finland have more than 1,000 kilometers border with Russia. So maybe the border with Russia and NATO countries will be longer. So for the Russian military forces, they needed to sell new soldiers or new troops to the Kaliningrad, to the St. Petersburg region, because Baltic Sea will be from all parts around with NATO countries, and so Russian Federation will be like an island in the situation. So maybe they don't think about this situation between the attacked Ukraine, but now many countries that have neutral or non-nuclear or non-military status think about to have some support from NATO organization. So maybe only Austria nowadays don't want to have support of this military bloc, but Finland and Sweden wants to be the part of this organization. But we see that Turkish President Erdogan has his own opinion on this situation, and maybe it have some longer time to negotiation between Turkish, Finland, and Sweden that these countries will go to NATO bloc.
Speaking of Turkey, how do you analyze Turkey's position? Do you think it's just a pretext just to align with Russia, perhaps?
No, I don't think this is a path to Russian Federation. I think Turkish wants some benefit from its own country. They want that we see that the list of their questions. They want that some organization which are supports Kurds political party will be and have their opportunities in basically in Sweden, that this organization don't have any government support from Sweden powers, and also Turkish wants that some Gulen's organization also they have the same status like in Turkey, the status of a terroristic organization. But I don't think that Sweden and Finland go to this way, and so maybe we see some compromise, and Turkish have that what it wants. They want also some airplanes, yes, militaries from the United States, like F-16, like and other things. So maybe it will be a very long process of agreement, but I think that the voice of Turkish not will be so long.
But Mr. Molchanov, Kirill, how do you think Russia will respond to the growing threat of NATO military infrastructure by its border? I mean, the very fast reason or pretext that Russia used in its operation, or let's say military operation in Ukraine, was the fact that it was concerned by Ukraine joining NATO.
Ukraine have opportunity nowadays to be to join the NATO club. So because we have war in our territory, we have very big problems, economical character. So I think if in the case of Sweden and Finland, only Turkish voice is negative. And in case of Ukraine, we see that in Germany and France don't think that this will be better for NATO countries that Ukraine joins this bloc. So I think this question is not actually nowadays. And if we see some request points in newspapers, in some yesterday was in New York Times, that they write that maybe it will be the better to Ukraine have the status of a neutral country, and like in Austria or like Switzerland or like Israel, with a big support of NATO countries, but not join the NATO-like organization.
Thank you indeed. In the latest escalation of an energy payment dispute with Western nations, Russia has halted its gas supply to Finland. Zelensky said all the deliveries had stopped, but added there would be no disruption to customers. In April, Gazprom demanded that all future payments for its export gas deliveries be made in rubles rather than euros. However, the Nordic country has refused to pay for its gas supplies in rubles. But the cutoff also follows an announcement that Finland will apply for NATO membership. Back to you, Mr. Manuel Pușle. While gas represents only 8% of the energy consumed in Finland that used by the Nordic country comes mainly from Russia, and its loss would still have a severe impact on the economy and employment because it plays a crucial role in industrial production. Would Finland cope without Russian gas now? I mean, Finland has already unveiled plans to do without it next winter, notably announcing the 10-year lease jointly with neighboring Estonia of a floating liquefied natural gas regasification terminal. Do you think this would save Finland's industrial production? And do you think that Finland's refusal to pay in rubles is the main reason behind Moscow's decision?
I think today Finland has solutions to face with this problem, concerning gas. And because Finland already operates a big turnover concerning energy savings, and of course, France is involved in this plan to help Finland on the energy aspect. Using nuclear technology, nuclear plants with French technology. And I think that today Finland is already prepared. And Mr. Putin's strategy concerning gas production on the stop of the delivery of gas on Finland wouldn't have a deep impact on Finland and the Finland economy. It won't have the same impact, for example, on Hungary or Germany. Germany will have to face with big problems. But concerning Finland, also you have big agreement with other northern countries, with Norway and Sweden, which has already developed renewable energy. So it won't be a problem for Finland and Finland economy.
Analysts do suggest an increase in the use of other energy sources such as wind power, but doing so is not going to be quick nor easy. Do you think, Mr. Manuel Pușle, this would save Europe after Russia halted gas on nations and forced unfriendly countries to pay in rubles? Noting that consumers will face rising energy and fuel bills, heating prices are likely to increase even more if Russia restricts gas exports to Europe. So definitely an alternative is a must. Timing of Russia's decision, however, came at a time where summer is coming, where gas is not really used. So do you think that this period from now until winter is enough for Zelensky to find any other alternatives, since their reserves are probably going to be consumed up?
Yes, concerning gas, with the arrival of summer, it will be okay for Europe, concerning consumption, of course. But it's time to make a decision, to make plans for the future, because in France, for example, the coming winter, we don't know how will the temperature. And at the moment, the nuclear factories in France, or nuclear plants, are under maintenance for a long time. The big challenge for Europeans is maybe this crisis in Ukraine will kick the big challenge of renewable energy decision, because a lot of countries decided to change, but according to the economic situation on ecology plans for governments, it took too long times. Of course, we saw the wind energy limits in Germany, for example, but we know that wind energy works very well in Sweden. So I think it's time to change. And the ecology challenge, for example, is in Mr. Macron, the French president, plan for his coming government, which is very important to underline today. France is changing, and maybe it will be followed by the other European Union members.
Thank you indeed. President Vladimir Putin said that the number of cyber attacks on Russia by foreign state structures had increased several times over, and that Russia must bolster its cyber defenses by reducing the use of foreign software and hardware.
The number of cyber attacks on the Russian information infrastructure overall the past few years has increased. But with the start of the special military operation in Ukraine and Donbass, these challenges have become more serious and more acute. As experts are saying, this can't be done by lone hackers. These attacks are launched from various states, and then they are well coordinated and come from state structures. Today, we can say that cyber aggression and sanctions against Russia have failed. We were ready as a whole. This is the result for the work we have been doing for the past years.
Mr. Molchanov Kirill, for several years, the Russian authorities have been developing a sovereign internet system that will eventually make it possible to isolate the Russian internet by disconnecting it from the main global servers. Do you think that these launched cyber attacks will push Russia even further to use a sovereign internet system away from the global one? And how soon can they likely do that? And what could be the outcome of such move?
I think that Russians don't isolate their internet because all these years they think that they will have some agreements, global agreement with West, with the European Union to have a normal negotiations with West countries. So it's not a question, but a biggest part of Russian establishment thinks that they are the part of West establishments. They have many development in Europe and USA. Their children studies in European universities, so they think that they are European. So they don't want to isolate there from Europe. And but Mr. Putin from 2014 years do all to have the isolation of Russia. But we see that the governments and some ministers don't move very don't move this way. So nowadays, yes, maybe they go step by step, like China. They have some firewall global, and maybe they need to have Russian analogs for YouTube, Russian analogs for Facebook, for Instagram, for another social programs. But it's not will be soon. It's maybe they maybe need years to have plus minus isolated internet that will be works only on Russian Federation.
Thank you indeed. Mr. Manuel Pushlet, the Kremlin denies wanting to build a national network under control as in China. But apparently that's what NGOs and dissidents fear. Yet Russian leader Vladimir Putin said that cyber attacks and sanctions against Russia have failed and that they were ready for it. Does this mean that Russia was planning before to use an independent system even though it denied it before? And since sanctions and cyber attacks have failed to stop Russia, what could Westerns do more to prevent Russia from taking over Ukraine? Or will Westerns surrender since aid is not stopping Russia, nor sanctions are?
I think the cyber attacks on the Russian Federation is a hidden part of this war. Because it sounds secret, you know. But I think isolating Russia from the World Wide Web is a very old project already studied by Mr. Putin on the Russian Federation. But maybe is inspired by the GAFAM companies, you know, Google, Amazon, and Facebook. They have decided to develop an independent network from the World Wide Web for saving, you know, to avoid cyber attacks. But because today cyber defense is a key of defense of modern countries on Western countries. For example, in France, we have developed a special headquarters dedicated to cyber attack management. And of course, we saw that also in the USA and other countries. But isolating Russia from the World Wide Web, I think it could be difficult at the moment. Imitating China, I think it's not a real good idea, because maybe they will have to face with problems, technical problems. And at the moment, it's time to work on peace. I think this is a major challenge for the Russian Federation.
Thank you so much, Manuel Pouchelet. Thank you, Mr. Makonov-Kirill. Thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on 24 News with me, Karim Fazakari. That's all we have for now. Bye-bye.